Hi, Church. I just wanted to do a quick video to supplement our study through Mark with our discipleship groups. I've recently met with my groups, and we had some good discussions, and I thought it might be interesting to you to just maybe give a little bit of a summary about some of the things we've been talking about, a little background information. One of the things that's very interesting when you approach the study of Mark is to remember that Mark, most scholars believe, was the very first gospel that was written. It was written before Matthew, Luke, and John. And so, in a sense, he was a trailblazer in telling the story of Jesus. And one of the things that might be interesting to you as you go through Mark with your discipleship group is to let Mark tell the story. Often we grow up in church, many of you, and you've heard lots of stories about Jesus. Even if you haven't grown up in church, you've probably heard many stories about the life of Jesus. Yet when we think about the fact that Mark was the first gospel written, we realize that many of his intended audience would be reading the stories about Jesus for the very first time. And so in that sense, Mark is really trying to present a good account of the identity of Jesus, of who he is and why we should know about him. And so one of the things I would advise you to do as you were kind of reading through Mark is to really let Mark tell you the story about Jesus' life. Don't rush to kind of go to the other gospels very quickly to know more about the life of Jesus. I mean, that's a good thing to do, and certainly when you study Matthew and Luke, for example, you will enhance and learn more about some of the stories as they often go into more detail than Mark does. But allow Mark to evangelize you, so to say. He is trying to tell the world about, in a written form, about the life of Jesus, and he was the first person to do so. So think of it as the story unfolds. Don't go too quickly to the spoilers. Let Mark tell you the story about Jesus' life. Pay attention to the details that he uses. Try to understand the importance of the points that he is trying to make. Because an important theme is the identity of Jesus. He begins talking about wanting to share the gospel with you. And so notice how he presents Jesus. What are the details that he's bringing out? What does he think is important? Notice the characters in the story. Who notices who Jesus is first? How long does it take the disciples to recognize him as the Messiah? Pay attention to these things as you read through this text together. A couple of quick points that our group noticed in the first section, in chapter 1, in the very first lesson that we did, is the priorities of Jesus' ministry. We see the account of Jesus' baptism and then him kind of launching into his ministry. And one of the things that we thought was interesting was the order that he did things. First, he went to the disciples, to fishermen, and he said, I'm going to make you fishers of men. He did that, and then after he did that is when he went to the synagogue and preached. And I think that's very interesting in sort of looking at the strategy of Jesus in ministry, isn't it? That it wasn't just the preaching to the lost world, but it was discipling people, a small number of people, as he went. And so a lot of times, if we think about the lasting effect of Jesus' ministry, it happened through the apostles. In a lot of ways. After Jesus died is when the apostles went out in boldness and really changed the world. And that's due in large part to the heavy investment of time that Jesus spent in these disciples. And so notice how his preaching came after he had the disciples following him and watching him preach. And we thought that was very interesting. Another word that I want to point out is a word that is repeated, especially in this section between 21 through 28, which I think is important in Mark's emphasis on the identity of Jesus. He says the word authority. That is a word repeated, and I hope you noticed that when you were doing your observation stage in your Bible reading, because that is significant, I think, when he's trying to talk about the identity of Jesus. Jesus taught as one who had authority, and immediately that was recognized. So as you continue to go through this week by week, do continue to ask the question, who is Mark telling me that Jesus is? What is Mark wanting me to understand about the person of Jesus? Thanks, church. God bless.